Hey, to all the real estate professionals out there, I want to let you know the Buyer's Mind is sponsored by Homebridge Financial. Homebridge loan officers are experts in new home financing, and they bring sales ideas and strategies and market intelligence and programs that will help sell homes. To learn more about that, go to builder.homebridge.com. Homebridge Financial, home financing made easy. Hey, are you looking for a calm voice in some turbulent times? Well, we can help on today's episode of The Buyer's Mind.
Welcome to The Buyer's Mind, where we take a closer look deep inside your customer's decision-making mechanism to reverse engineer the perfect sales presentation. Now, please welcome your host, Jeff Shore.
Well, welcome, everyone, once again to The Buyer's Mind. I am your host, Jeff Shore, and we got a really special treat for you. You know, I'm trying to line up people who can really give us wisdom in turbulent times. Last week, we had Anthony Iannarino. He and I talked about the psychology of fear and how to not let fear reign. And today, we're going to take a really, really positive look at what we can learn about the world, about each other, and about ourselves in these times. I was so thrilled when we sit down and ask, who do we want on the podcast this week to really bring that positive message? And of course, my mind went right to Bob Burg, and we're so thrilled to have the great Bob Burg. Let's listen to what he has to say. Well, we're just so thrilled to have back on The Buyer's Mind Bob Burg. We've had him on before. If you don't know who Bob Burg is, you really need to get out more. The author of a number of books, of course, the Go Giver series, Endless Referrals, and a prolific blogger, podcaster, and one of the just great voices of reason out there in a world that sometimes goes insane, especially in days like this. And I was sitting around with my team saying, hey, who do we want to have on the podcast here real soon that can give us a really, really healthy dose of perspective? And somebody said, what about Bob Burg? I said, yes, absolutely. So we reached out. Bob was good enough to carve some time out of his busy schedule. So thrilled to have him back on The Buyer's Mind. Even more thrilled to call him a good friend of mine, Bob Burg. Bob, welcome back to the program. Thanks for making time for us.
Hey, Brother Jeff, just always a pleasure and an honor to get to speak with you. Thank you for having me.
Let's have some fun. I want to start here. I was Seth Godin, he of course, he writes his blog every single day. And today, just a fantastic blog post. Whenever you're in the audience, whenever you're listening to this, the blog post is entitled Calm Also Has a Coefficient. And he talks about how quickly panic spreads and how slowly calm spreads, and the need for calm at a time like we're at right now, and yet others seem to be calling for panic. It was really, really well written. And I just want to start there a little bit, Bob, because I've always read you as the calm voice, as the adult in the room here, the voice of reason when things are going a little bit askew. And I just wanted to get your take right out of the gate on Seth Godin's comments.
Oh, thank you. You know, this is one of the few Seth columns I didn't read. I haven't read that one, so I'm glad you brought that up. But was it one of his typical 2-sentence blogs that makes tons of sense, or what? Oh, okay.
Yeah, this was actually 14 sentences. It's one of the longest blog posts that Seth has ever written.
He's one of these guys who, he'll say this. I'll write 500 words and never really get it as I want it. And I look at a blog of Jeff, and it's Seth rather. 3 sentences, and he says something so profound. And I thought, how did he do that?
Absolutely. And he does it every single day. Yeah.
Unbelievable. I know. And I certainly agree with what he said. There have been certain things within this situation we've been going through over the last month or two that have been disappointing, and other things have been very encouraging. And we'll talk about that as well. But one disappointment is, of course, the panic, which has a payoff for certain people, I guess, to keep people in panic. And I saw a column the other day, and I was very disappointed, Jeff, because this is a person who, while politically I don't always agree with this person, I've always admired this person's, as you say, voice of reason. I've always enjoyed their thought processes. And I was disappointed because this person said, and I'm paraphrasing here, maybe now is the time to panic. And I thought, oh, no, it's never a time to panic. There was this, I remember in this movie, I don't remember which movie, but the person says, now is not the time to panic. And then, something happened really bad the next sentence. They said, Now is the time to panic.
Yeah,
right?
now is the perfect time to panic. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
No, it's never. Now, here's what this person meant. What this person was saying was it hasn't been taken seriously enough. Is what this person was saying.
Right.
Now, whether you agree with that or not, good people can have their different opinions. But I think what she meant was, now is the time to, be sure you're taking it seriously.
Right.
Now is the time to do the things we need to do. Now is the time to see what is in our control and what isn't. Okay, that's fine. I get that. But oh my goodness, there's never a time to suggest panic. Why? Because panic, by its very nature, is an attachment. It's an emotional attachment to a situation. And as we know, because you teach this, Jeff, when you're acting out of emotion, now don't get me wrong, emotion's a great thing. Emotion adds a lot to our lives. But when our emotions are driving us, when they're in control of us, we're never in a position to make a good decision.
Mm-hmm. Right.
No, panic. I just was so disappointed when I saw that. Instead, let's look at, as you've mentioned, what can we control and what's outside of our control. And what we can control, first of all, is our attitudes. And I don't think that in a rah-rah motivational sense of the word, right? Attitude. But let's face it, our attitude does determine, pretty much everything that's going to come about from that. So if your attitude is, okay, I don't like the situation. It's not what I would want to have happen. I don't prefer it, but this is what's happening. Now, how do we make the best of it?
Let me ask you this. I want to ask you a question. It's in two parts. First of all, setting the current environment aside, are you generally an optimist? I would read you as being somebody who's generally an optimist.
I had to retrain myself to be. My first, I'd say 35 years, Jeff, no. I was, first of all, I was not an optimist. I was a pessimist and somebody who, now don't get me wrong, when I had confidence in myself in a certain area, I was optimistic that way, that I felt I'd succeed, but I had a lot more areas where I wasn't confident in myself. But in terms of optimist or pessimist, I tended to look at the bad side of things. I tended to look at the negative side of things. And I was very surprised. I was in a conversation with John Gordon, who's a remarkable writer and teacher, and he wrote The Energy Bus and No Complaint. And we both were talking about the fact that by our nature, we're not necessarily positive people. And we do tend to see that. And we both, we found out, retrained ourselves to be a positive person. So, with me, it was when Charlie Tremendous Jones, who I'm sure you remember, great. So he sent me Benjamin Franklin's book, The Autobiography. And within that book, there was a chapter that Ben Franklin wrote because at one time he realized that there were certain traits and characteristics he possessed that were not serving him, were not serving the people around him. There were going to be roadblocks on his way to success. Now, there was no Dale Carnegie around at the time. So, he was an inventor, Ben Franklin. So he invented his own personal development system. And so there were 13 traits, and he would work on one trait a week. And I mean, just totally, really work on that trait. And then at the end of that week, he'd work on the second one, then the third one. And then after 13 weeks, he'd been through the course one time. Then he'd repeat them and repeat. Now, 13 times 4 are 52. So you get to go through the course 4 times in a year. And he found that at the end of that time, he improved upon those traits immeasurably. Well, I did the same thing as Ben. You know me, I'm a follower of a system, right? What system? The process of predictably achieving a goal based on a logical and specific set of how-to principles. So what I did is I took those areas that I was weak in and decided to turn them into strengths. And one of them was my attitude. And that was the first one. And it really had to do with gratitude and looking at things in the most positive way I could. And again, I had to retrain my brain to do that. So if you ask me now, are you a positive person who looks at the good stuff? Yeah, I am. But that was not my nature. That was something I needed to do.
Are you a control freak?
By nature, I am. Absolutely. And then again, at that same period of time, and say, okay, Burg, you are not the general manager of the universe. God is. And there's certain things you cannot control.
Right.
And that helped a real lot. But and that's something, by the way, that I have to continue to this day to really remind myself of.
It's one of those things where, because I'm not a control freak, I'm smart in one area. It's smart about how dumb I am. And I surround myself with people who make up for my deficiencies. I have people around me who I pay to be control freaks, but I'm not a control freak. And I think that actually helps me in times of chaos and confusion, because one of the things about control freaks is they don't deal very well when things are completely out of their control. And right now there's a lot that's out of control. And so to be able to look at it and say, okay, what can I control, and just focus on that is an important skill.
That was one reason why I worked on that trait so hard.
Yeah, sure.
I absolutely was. I considered myself a benevolent control freak. Mm-hmm. You know, if things would only work as I wanted them to, everything would be great, right? Yeah. Life just doesn't work that way. So
exactly. Yeah. There's another angle to this that you might be able to bring. And as I was thinking this through, in fact, somebody on my team said to me just this week, and she's in her late 20s, and she said, Jeff, one thing you need to understand is that, when you look at the big events of our day, she said, for me, the Great Recession of 10 years back or so, so I was still living at home. It didn't really affect my day-to-day life all that much. 9/11, I was 6, what's interesting now is that you and I just want to speak to the millennials here for just a second. And you and I have been around long enough to see the Great Recession and 9/11 and the first Gulf War. We saw a president get shot. We saw terrorist attacks at the Olympic Games, way back in Germany. I mean, we've seen a lot. So just a word to the younger people out there. Does it get easier to handle as you see, global issues that arise that are very traumatic? Do you think it gets easier to handle over time?
I don't know if the feeling is easier as much as the feeling that if you will get past it. It will go back to the way it was. So, when something, and let's be technical here, yucky happens, okay, right, it still feels lousy. And one of the things that, I've always had an issue with in the field of personal development is what I call a political correctness within the personal development field, as though everything has got to be perfect all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, bad thing happened. Well, it's okay. It's good because, probably is good. And that we'll see it in, when we look back on it, that it was a good thing. Things that happen to us typically do happen for a reason. But with that comes afterwards. There's that sort of, you can never feel badly about something. No, of course, things happen. Yucky things happen. It's a lousy feeling, and we can feel lousy. It's okay. We can acknowledge that something does not feel good as it's happening. Mm-hmm. And this is to what you said, we can also understand that we will get through it and things will come back, and they'll probably come back better before, and life will continue to advance as it always does. And, until the next thing happens. And then, yes, we'll come back from that too. And it will still feel lousy when it happens. So mm-hmm. I don't think it's a matter of, do you get used to a feeling about, it's lousy, it's lousy. But we do know that, yes, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. We will get over this. Things will get back, and we can feel secure in that knowledge.
And it's interesting that in the midst of that, though, as you say, and this ties back to something you said earlier, when we allow our emotion to rule the day, that it becomes very, very difficult to have such a reasoned approach about the idea that it will get better and we're going to get through this. The more that we adopt that panic and let our emotion take control, we're going to have a problem. But I also look at it based on something you just said, and I'm just thinking about something that Solomon wrote about 2,700 years ago when he said, it's better to mourn than to dance. And there's a little hyperbole in that statement, but I think what he was trying to say is that there are lessons to be learned in times of adversity that you cannot learn in times of prosperity, and it is going to make you who you are. And this is a piece of advice that I gave actually to one of my own kids this week, was to look at it and say, it's not too early to start asking the question, not what will happen through this, but what will you become through this? It's not too early to start learning about yourself through this process. I think that's not a bad idea for people to say, how am I responding? How am I dealing with this? And how will I be a better person by the time I'm done?
I love that. I love that. And it's so true. What you don't want to do, and let's say we're not talking about this, but anything lousy that happens to someone, what I just, ask people to do is don't say to this person when they're in the midst of misery, not to say, hey, this is going to be great. You're going to look back on this one day. But no, when they're in the midst of a horrible thing, someone they love passes, or just a real big disappointment, or whatever it might be. It's just, oh, I'm so sorry you're going through this. Is there anything I can do for you? And empathize with them and let them be with that. Now, there's also, of course, when you have a situation where you're leading someone, or, of course, with a child, is to also help them see, once that part is through, to help them see where, they are going to be able to benefit from that. But let's say when someone's going through any kind of grief or mourning, put the positive thing, of hey, this is, put that aside and just empathize with that person. So I think there's a time and place for everything. But yeah, absolutely. I love what you just said.
Yeah, it's a really good time, I think, to take the opportunity to say, how am I responding, and what is the best way to do that, both for me and to the people in my life? We're at my church, we're trying to coordinate a blood drive, because 60% of the nation's blood supply comes from blood drives at corporations or at churches or at civic organizations. Well, guess what? The churches and the businesses and the civic organizations are closed. And so, we're going to see this real need for blood. What is it that we can do? And even in brainstorming through that and thinking that through, it lifts the spirit, because it takes the focus off of me and how inconvenienced I am. And listen, I think, there are people who are listening right now who are really going to struggle over the course of the next several weeks in very specific ways, either physically or having family members who are ill, or significant loss of income. Those things are going to happen. But there are also a whole lot of people like you and I, Bob, who are going to look at it and say, okay, is this going to ding my business? Yeah, it's going to ding my business. Am I going to be okay? Yes, I am. Not so the person who changes the sheets in the hotels, or sells, tickets at the ballpark, or the TSA agents that are going to get laid off. There's no question about it. There are a lot of people who are going to be much worse off. So starting with that gratitude for where you are right now, regardless of your situation, but then asking the question, how do I lend a hand? How do I help right now? And even if it's nothing, and I want to just chat a little bit about some Go-Giver principles here, because what would the Go-Giver say about what we're doing right here? One of the things about the Go-Giver series is it's so outwardly focused. When you think about it, and for those of you who are listening who are not aware, the Go-Giver, a series of books that Bob has penned, has co-authored, that are just phenomenal attitude books that apply to all areas of life, but they're all outward focused. And so the opportunity now, even by that word of encouragement, that handwritten note, that telling somebody that you love them, even by phone, that you've never actually said those words before. What a powerful, powerful opportunity. Where else can we look to the Go-Giver for advice on how to navigate through these times?
Well, and I appreciate those very kind words. I think that really is the beginning of it, that you move from that I focus or me focus to what we call that other focus. And you ask yourself, how can I make another person's life better? And I would even, think of writing down all the, because as you know, when we write it down, we quantify it, and it's there in front of us. And write down, what can I do that can make someone's life better? Who can I call? Who can I write? Who can I text? Can I share my knowledge with someone who might need it? For example, we know a lot of parents now are having to homeschool their kids, right? I mean, literally, there's no school. Do I have a certain knowledge in a certain area that I can actually do a webcast where I can have parents bring their children in and watch, and the parents can watch too, or the parents can maybe take some time to catch up doing things they want as I teach the kids. You're right. So how can we utilize maybe our sphere of influence and the people we know to set up some of those things, even for other people? And I love your idea about that blood drive. Get together a group of people to do that drive and to help a lot of people. So I think really, if you just write down all the different things you can do in the different areas, that is just such a positive contribution to the world around you.
I'm feeling convicted and excited at the same time right now, Bob, even as you're talking about that, because, I've lived in the neighborhood that I live in right now for about 4 years, and I casually know my neighbors, but not particularly well. And this is probably not the time where we're going to set up a game night with them. It's not the right environment. But is there the opportunity just to let them know that they're loved? And years ago, I read a book called The Art of Neighboring. And one of the things that the book asked you to do was draw a little map of your street and then fill in the names of everybody that you could identify. And Karen, my wife Karen, and I quickly refer to it as the map of shame for our recognition there were so many names that we could not fill out. But what an opportunity even right now, if you're at home and you like to bake pie, drop it on the doorstep and just say, just want to, I'm thinking about you and make just make somebody's day today, but then also make the inroads into relationships when we can sit down and have a game night down the road. So there are so many things if we're willing to get outside of ourselves. And as I say, I'm convicted about this, but I'm also excited about this because there are opportunities in times of adversity that you're not going to get in times of prosperity.
Yeah. Oh, that's very true. And, you also brought up, I think, a great point when you talked about the baking the pies, because we all have, just as we talk about in business, when we talk about having and Mike Littman coined this term, assets of value, right? Yeah. And that's sort of those strengths, traits, talents, characteristics that we bring to the table that allow us to add value to the marketplace that, for which obviously we're going to be financially rewarded. In this case, though, your assets of value are anything that you are good at, any talent that you have, any strength that you have that can somehow help another person during this situation. And whether it's, again, baking pies, teaching a course, entertaining, or doing something that you can do for someone else, we can reach right into that and utilize that outward.
Just one last question here, Bob. You're an introspective guy. What do you think you will have learned, we will have learned as a nation, as a world, when the dust settles on all of this?
There are things that we will learn and things that I kind of wish we would learn that I'm not sure that we're going to.
I get that. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Right. But I think we will learn of that we're probably even more interconnected than we think we are. Yeah, because this more than anything else has said, hey, there's no one immune at this point. Mm-hmm. To something. So I hope it will cause greater responsibility to be expected and accepted. And but whether it does or not, who knows? Yeah. I also hope there'll be that once this is over, and I really think things are going to come back, and things are going to come back stronger than ever. And I hope people have appreciation and gratitude for that when it does. I also, I had read something, and I'm sure you read this as well, where it was a tweet. I think it said something like 60 years ago, our parents were asked to go to war. We're being asked to stay home. Mm-hmm. And, so we can be grateful for that, as well, if we're looking for something to be grateful for.
Yeah, I love it. And, I know this is I'm getting a little bit squishy on this one, but I'm okay with it. When I look at what's going on with this virus, what is a virus? Well, it's a network. And what you just said about the idea that we're going to learn and realize how deeply interconnected we are. Well, how does a virus spread? It spreads through a network. It's a connection of one to another. Well, what about that idea of the kindness virus? What about the idea that just the kindness that I invest in somebody's life when I am not thinking about myself, when I'm willing to intentionally speak positive into their life, is that a virus? Could that be a virus? Could that work on a network? And I think that now more than ever is exactly what we need to do, whether that kindness is to your spouse, your kids, your parents, the people who are living in the home right now, and you're spending a lot of time with them. And so you're having to really double down on what it's going to take, but also just the kindness for people around us and in our world. It's a great opportunity if we take advantage of it.
I think you've got your next video right there, Jeff. Nothing squishy about that at all. That was absolutely, that was wonderful. And that's a message that we all need to hear. And that's when I can't wait to retweet and repost, because absolutely, let's say it this way, there's going to be a virus. We have a choice of what virus we can instigate, if you will. And if you will instigate a virus of kindness, how do you do it? You spread it right through that network, and it's a worldwide network. So I just love what you said.
All right, I'll go to work on the next video post. Bob Burg, it's good to talk to you under any circumstances, but I just feel much better than I did a half hour ago. Thank you so much for taking the time, for sharing your insight and your wisdom and your calm voice in a weird time. Really, really appreciate you joining us. Thank you.
Likewise, and thank you.
And there you have it. Wise words from Bob. And I just want to challenge you, not just to say, oh, that was nice. I want you to just challenge yourself right now to say, what am I going to do? What am I going to do right now? What is one thing that I can do right now that is in my control? Whether that's something big like starting a blood drive, whether it's something small like saying I love you to somebody, what is something that you can do right now? The purpose of this podcast today is not just to get you feeling better, it's to get you to act better. So what can you do right now? Take an action to improve the world. Thanks as always for listening. We appreciate so much the opportunity to chat. And at the end of the day, we're going to come out stronger. We absolutely are. You'll have the opportunity in the lives of the people around you to change their world.